I'm nervous. Whew. I can't believe this is finally here. Hey, family, welcome to I Am African podcast. This podcast is where we get real about what it means to be African in today's world. Whether you are from Africa, part of the diaspora, or curious to learn more about the African experience, this is the podcast for you. Yes, I'm really excited to say this journey with you. I've been planning this for 4 years now, and I think it's about time I share this journey and everything that I have planned. When I shared with people that I wanted to do this podcast, a lot of people thought it was going to be basically me just sitting down, making a lot of controversial statements, or talking about things that people feel uncomfortable to talk about because that's who I am. That's my personality. And guess what? They are partially right. This podcast, we are going to have uncomfortable conversations. We are going to share conversations on uncomfortable topics that people are scared of talking about. I am your host, Liz. I was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo and grew up in the refugee camp in Zambia. So I spent a lot of my life back home, as we always say, and my experience and my life has defined who I am today. And being African has helped me become what I am today. All of my accomplishments, all of my successes, all of my challenges, all of my life stories is because of who I am as an African person. When I go around, especially being in the US, I always find myself connecting with people from other African countries, my fellow Africans. I have friends from all over Africa, and we all live in different parts of the world. What can you expect from this podcast? We are going to talk about the African experience. We are going to talk about Africa as a continent. Yes, Africa is a continent, not a country. We have 54 countries, and we speak over 3,000 languages in one continent. For those who don't know, this podcast is going to educate you on Africa. I'm glad you're tuning in because this podcast is for everyone. It's for Africans, people that want to learn about Africa. The podcast will feature conversations with different guests from activists, entrepreneurs, healthcare professionals, cybersecurity professionals, engineers, project managers. You never know. You're going to find a lot of people that will be having conversation about their African experience. And something that I do want to remind my audience is that this podcast, we are Africans having conversations about what it means to be African. We are not speaking on behalf of the whole continent, but we will be talking about the similarities that we have seen based on our experiences with other Africans. If you want to share your experience, please comment, share, post anything. It would be nice to hear about other people's experiences. We're going to talk about different exciting topics. First, we have to define the African identity. I have a very special guest, so you don't want to miss. That will be the first episode that will be coming out soon. Look out for it. We are going to be dropping that very soon. I can't wait to share with you. My special guest is someone some of you know, but some of you are about to get to know. We're going to talk about the African experience in the West. What happens when Africans leave Africa? What are some of their experiences? What are some of their culture shock? As people say. For me, coming to the US, I grew up in a refugee camp. I was not aware of the concept of taxes. I lived a life of bargaining. If they say something is $5, I say I have $4 and the person will take the $4. But when I came to the US, I found out that not only do you need the $5, but you might need an extra dollar because, yeah, taxes. So that was a little bit for culture shock. And also we were talking about the different misconceptions that people have about Africa. Media portrayed Africa as one of the poorest places to the point where people have to save, or people cannot throw away food. In the US, they have to save it because of starving kids in Africa. But how would these kids get that food, or how would they benefit from that? That image that was painted in Americans' heads is something that we all ended up experiencing as African when we came to the US. We want to address that misconception. There are a lot of other misconceptions that we're going to talk about. And then, of course, we're going to address the beef between Africans and African Americans. We're going to have an open dialogue between Africans and African Americans. It is going to be very interesting. There are a lot of things we don't get to talk about. Can we come to a common ground and work together as Black people and not just separate Africans and African Americans? Yes. We're also going to talk about tech and politics. The politics episode is very controversial, it's very uncomfortable, but how long are we going to be silent? How long are we going to be scared of talking about African politics, about African leadership? It's time that we start holding our leaders accountable. We are going to address that in the podcast. We want to highlight the diversity, beauty, and successes of being African. I am a proud African, and I know there are a lot of proud Africans out there. I'm excited that people have volunteered their time to sit down and have these conversations. I cannot wait for you all to have your view of what this podcast is about. There are going to be some controversial statements made, but that's how people feel, and that's their experiences. So you do not want to miss this podcast. I Am African podcast. This is the podcast that you've been waiting for. This is a podcast that you need in your life right now. Thank you for tuning in. Please share with your friends, follow our pages, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and turn on alerts, because as soon as another episode drops, you need to be one of the first people to see it. Use this as a conversation starter between you and your family members, you and your friends, especially those friends that don't know anything about Africa. Yes, those friends that think Africa is a country and not a continent. I think it's about time we change that in the United States and all over the world. Thank you so much for being here and for tuning in into I Am African, the podcast. Our official episode of the podcast is going to drop very soon. Be on the lookout for it. And it is going to be defining the African identity. I want you to start this journey with me. Thank you for tuning in. This is I Am African podcast. I am your host, Liz. I can't wait to see what the future holds for you and I. So please go ahead, follow, subscribe, share, comment, share your experiences as well. I will see you very soon.